members are on. So that's perfect. And DPR5 is published, and DPR3, Krista Wigington might really benefit from, the recording. So thank you all again for joining, and thanks again, Trisha, for doing this today.
Yeah. I know. Thank you everyone for participating. I know this is like kind of this is something that's extra to the regular workload, but we think it's really important, and it's also required for anything that is funded by the state of California to be in an accessible format. And it shouldn't be too hard, especially with the template that was circulated. And just to be clear, because I know that we've had other WRF/State Water Board templates circulated, the one that you really should be using to format your should be the one that has the accessible in the title, because that's the one that we have actually gone through and made sure that all of the different headers and styles are correct for the format of this document. Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in. Our accessibility standards are for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standards, so that's WCAG. There are kind of different kinds of accessibility, but the standards that you'll meet, and I'll show you why this matters in a little bit, the standards that you meet are just for those standards. There are some more strict standards, and so the things that we'll go through today are not as strict as some other accessibility standards that you might encounter. And also what we're covering today is only going to be covering Microsoft Word applications. So if you're writing your documents in any other kind of word processor besides Microsoft Word, some of this might carry over, but it's really going to be a case-by-case basis. And so you'll really need to just find some kind of accessibility standards. And some things, like if you're writing a document in R, you probably will just need to have to put it into something like Microsoft Word to make it accessible. Some things might be just not the right kind of features to make them accessible. So I have this whole ribbon expanded and my screen is kind of small today. But these first few pages, we didn't do too much to make them accessible. So what you want to do for these first few pages is just follow the directions that the Water Research Foundation provided on these ones. And also feel free throughout this you guys can interrupt me and ask questions throughout. I think we'll have plenty of time for that. So these we left kind of as is. The logos are both in place. They're both already at the right size. And the reason that we're kind of okay just leaving this as is a screen reader will just read from top to bottom, but it's kind of light on detail throughout these first couple pages. And so we're just it's fine for them to not be in the headers format and using the word styles that the rest of the document will. So starting here, there's, if you haven't used the word styles before, you'll see this little arrow popped up on the side. That means that this was put into a different kind of style. So the template that Erin had designed has these different styles that you want to use for the different types of headers throughout the document. So this is the most important part of making an accessible document, is using the right headers in the right places, because a screen reader, so for the visually impaired, a screen reader will just go through, and if there's not these kind of features throughout the document, it'll just read top to bottom. And later, if say they want to go back and just read the methods section or something, the screen reader has no choice but to read top to bottom unless there's these breaks throughout to kind of section out the document. So these are already designed. Erin already designed these styles in your styles pane. So under the home tab in the styles pane, Erin has already designed these to be the format that is required for the template. So this is heading 1. I could also just write it here. In the styles pane. And it already is Calibri bold. It's already 20 point. It's already this color. And then regular text is just going to be, it's called State Water Board body text normal. In this, I think it might change based on what your standards are, but it also might be the same. So this body text normal one, once you hit enter from this, it will automatically revert to the normal text. So that one's pretty easy. These, again, we didn't make these accessible, and that's kind of okay. This is just follow the standard WRF directions here, and then throughout here. So same thing, this one got added as heading 1, and this just breaks the document apart to make it easier for the screen reader to find the right points throughout. And same thing here. This is manually the Water Research Foundation's table of contents and table of tables will be, these are like manually edited. So these are ones that you're just adhere to the standards that they've put here, but this format should be easy to manipulate.
So, Tricia, you're saying that won't automatically populate as we add in like new chapters and stuff, or it will?
It will not. So I believe that this was a standard that they want to preserve, and so they did not want to go the route of using the native Word table of contents. I don't know if Barb has any insight on that.
No, I don't. Elise, what do you think? I think we're fine.
Yeah, so the reason we typically prefer them to be manual is that a lot of these functionalities in Word don't work properly. So when you have the links between the table of contents and those lists and the headings and captions, a lot of times those connections break and we have to go and manually fix it anyway. So that's just kind of why we tend to prefer to have them be manually entered, is just so that it's easier to use when it comes to publishing time, since those functionalities tend to break on us.
Yeah, I do agree that, sorry, Brian, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, some of these reports are pretty big for us to be like constantly updating those as we're making all these edits. It's like, I see how it's easier at the end, but it's going to be really hard while we're doing it. Is there like some workaround we can do where we still have that functionality while we're like building these docs, and at the end we turn it off or something?
I think you could do that. I think the complexity here, Brian, is that like you kind of have to be good at Microsoft Word to use them correctly, and it sounds like you know how to use them. And so for you, it might not be such a problem, but I think, yeah, I think you could use the native ones, and then at the end, you know, you do your update and all the numbers get in the right place, and then you could just like make it adhere to the Water Research Foundation standard here.
Yeah, I just wonder when you have them turned on and then you turn them off, you know, it often you lose the figure numbers, you lose the sections. You know, I don't think it's as simple as just turning it off. You know, but we could you know, see what happens, I think, on the early ones.
Okay. Yeah. So. I guess kind of at your discretion, and it might, I think when it's all said and done, it needs to meet these standards. So whether that makes it more complicated or less complicated for you, yeah, it definitely is something that needs to be done. I would just do it at the end of the writing of the document. Okay. And then same thing for the table of figures. Same thing here, heading 1. And then this is all pretty self-explanatory. So the part I want to get to is this section, the meat of the report, when it's going to be sectioned out into different subheaders. This is where it gets a little bit more intensive with the use of the headers. So this one started with heading 1, and then this next style is called section title, and that's in the style pane. And it will meet this kind of format. And then the subheads, these are all in the style pane. You want to just use the right subhead. There's subhead 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they do reflect these standards that are written here. So subhead 2 is a bit smaller, subhead 3, and subhead 4. So you want to just be sure every time you have a break in your section and you move on to the next item or the next topic of discussion to just be using the right format. This is again something that might be easiest to do at the end because you'll have these kind of numbers numbering through, but even I get confused still where I'm at and which one is which. It's helpful for me to follow a pattern a lot of the time. So the subhead 1 just has the one number, the one sub number, and then subhead 2 has 2 sub numbers. Subhead 3 has 3 sub numbers. For the Water Research Foundation, they don't have numbers for subhead 4, so this would be like a very sub section of your document. So that's like one of the biggest things that will be useful for translating this document into a PDF version and still preserving the screen reader ability of that document. So for equations, if you're going to be using equations in your document, you should use the equation format that's in Word. So this is under the insert pane if you haven't already done this one before, and then you can add the equation from here. Right, maybe I lost it. But this type of format the screen reader is going to be will much better read a format like this than if you were to try to like manually put something over something and equal to something else. It'll read really poorly versus this format. It knows to expect an equation and it reads it as if it were an equation. Equations don't have alt text, but you would use a equation number and caption at your discretion. Okay, and so the other big thing for making accessible documents is figures. So these figures, you always want to have alt text. You need alt text for all of your figures. That's going to be like the number one thing that fails a document for accessibility is the figures. So there's 2 ways to add alt text. You can right click it and you can click edit alt text here. And then you write something here. This would be blank most of the time when you are inserting a figure. I'll also say you can, if you're working from like Excel, Microsoft Excel to Microsoft Word, sometimes you'll end up inserting kind of like a clickable, featureable image or figure, so it'll be like a graph that you can actually interact with and see the data of, because Microsoft talks to Microsoft and it's pulling it from that Excel sheet, and that's going to be much more complicated to make accessible than if you were to just save your figure as an image and then insert it as an image and create alt text for it. There might be circumstances under which you want to preserve that link to a Microsoft Excel, but it does require a lot more work. So if you can get away with not doing that, then that's that would be really useful for making your document accessible. One more thing that I'm gonna end up just sharing my screen instead of just the one document is the other thing that is really useful is a color contrast analyzer. So kind of everything up until this point has been about using screen readers. This is a free software color contrast analyzer, and this will help you determine if you have enough contrast between different features of your graph to be readable for people with impaired vision or people with red-green color blindness. And so this is kind of what I was talking about before. There's these different levels of accessibility. So WCAG is the type of accessibility we need to meet. And this AA accessibility is what we need to be meeting. So there's contrast for text. And of course, black on white has a contrast, and it would pass for text. But this little tool is really cool. I'll send the link for you to use if you want it. I think for figures, it's like use your best judgment. If you wouldn't put something like a bright green on a bright purple, because you would visually see that it's really hard to see the contrast between those two things. But if you made a figure and you're kind of questioning whether it would meet like the contrast requirements, you can use this tool. And it's really easy. So I have background color and I have this little like dropper here, eyedropper. And so I just choose like, this is my background and this is my foreground. So I'll show you something also. So like this gray on this light gray background is not a very good contrast, but there is this black bar around it. So I'm going to click on the black bar instead, or dark gray bar. And so for non-text contrast, this does pass. And so this would be fine. This green on the light background, I also should check to see if that meets the standard. And that passes for non-text contrast. If I was using only 11, regular text means like 11 point or 12 point size text, that wouldn't be enough of a contrast to pass normal, but we're looking at the figure one, so it seems okay. And then there's a green on the gray. And so that one failed. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you were only having the green on the gray, that might not be enough enough contrast this figure accessible, because it's just the contrast is not great enough. But yeah, and so there's some standard in here. There's 3:1, and the 3:1 is the minimum that you need to meet for the contrast to be accessible. And this contrast ratio is only 1.8 to 1. So that is just a tool that I think could be used kind of to spot check the document as you are going through for your figures. But if you feel pretty confident in your figures that you use just black on a white background, then you probably don't need to check it. Okay.
So, Tricia, just to stop you there, I imagine there are some figures that really benefit from color, and multiple data inputs, and so manipulating it using color, is that not going to be recommended?
No, I think you can still use color. But I think also, like, first use your best judgment when you're constructing the figure. So like I said, like, don't use all this bright palette that melts together, or all like a pastel palette, but also those outlines. So you can see on these, on this figure, this is like outlined in a very dark gray on a pretty light colored background. And that does a lot for increasing the visibility. So using figure on text or on using color in your figures does add a lot of utility to a lot of figures. So I wouldn't say stay away from them. Just be really conscious about what colors you're using, and be conscious of red-green colorblind. So don't put red text on a green background, and those kind of like things to just keep in your mind as you're constructing them. And then for a final check, I would use that color contrast analyzer to see if the contrast between different things is high enough. So again, like, and also if, say, each one of these bars was a different color, but they're all on this background, so I don't need to check this bar against this bar because it doesn't matter. So you can use lots of colors in the same thing, just like where they meet and where they're providing contrast. It should be examined. And also, if you're trying to use two colors that a colorblind person wouldn't be able to see, and you're saying the red bars depict this and the green bars depict this, and they look the same, then you could use a different kind of parameter. So you could use like the striped bars and the solid bars or something like that.
I thought it was always best practice to use patterns rather than color, you know, in bars and graphs and things like that, just for people who are colorblind.
Yeah, I think that is the preferred practice. When Julie said figure, I was thinking of less quantitative and more like qualitative figures as well. So I don't want to scare you away from using something that like shows the process of what you're doing because it has a lot of color. But yeah, for like data-driven figures, if you want to show difference, using a pattern is a really good way of doing that. And then also the amount, back to the alt text, it just occurred to me when we were talking about this, the alt text, the level of description that you can add for the alt text is really at your discretion. But so if you're not describing what is in the figure in too much detail in the body of the text, you'll want to add a little bit more to the alt text. But if it's really well described in your in the body of your document, then you can just add like kind of a very high level alt text for that figure. And really, again, you don't want to just have this be like figure 1, figure 2, figure 3 for your alt text, because the screen reader will just go through, and if someone wants to just pick out all of the figures, the screen reader will just go through and pull out all the titles, the alt text titles, and it's impossible to discriminate which one was which if you don't add a robust enough description of that figure. So just something to consider, that you need to say at least like, this is the figure of patient excreta and secreta production to sewer. And the screen reader at least has that extra level of detail to provide to the consumer. Okay, let me move on. Okay, and so for tables, another thing that you really need to be aware of with tables is that you should really only be using tables for tabular data. So I know a lot of people like to use them for structural formatting in the document, and then just like clearing the borders so it looks like it's all in a really nice order. But it's really it will read really poorly to a screen reader because it'll read across the top and then down the table, and so it ends up losing its utility to a screen reader. So you should format non-tabular data using the columns feature of Word, or also you can just use the tabs feature. Yeah, and it should provide a little bit more utility. But also, again, if it's scanning for just the tables of the document and there's like these tables that are full of non-tabular data in the introduction or in the references or something like that, then it just ends up building all this kind of data that the consumer's not looking for. Another thing to know about tables, in the table design, if you don't already know this, when you set up a table, so this table looks like it's trying to read from, like, this column provides the description for this, just go down here, this column provides the description for this set of data, this column provides the description for these rows. So if you're setting that up like that, you want the header row to be clicked. And then if you have these rows are describing data here, you want first column to be clicked. So this table just has a header row that's describing the data all in here. So I would unclick first column, because first column tells the screen reader that this is the title for this data, which it is not in this circumstance. But if it was, then I would want first column clicked. And that also helps preserve the utility of the table when it moves, when it is converted into a PDF. And a PDF screen reader will, the PDF version of screen readers is much more highly attuned. There's a lot more things that it's looking for. And so it will just, it will assume that whatever direction you've provided in here is what is in here. And so if you can change it once it gets into the PDF form, but it's much easier to just do it here. Okay. So again, these are, we changed our styles. These are heading 1. This is heading 1. And the last thing I wanted to provide direction on, so this is not necessarily for this particular thing. This is just showing you how to cite a magazine article, but it has a hyperlink in here. And some additional direction I wanted to provide on hyperlinks is that in your body of the document, if you wanted to provide a link and you said something like, the guidance document for this can be found here, and then you hyperlinked the word here to some web address that you wanted someone to find that document at, you want to actually use the words like guidance document to hyperlink to that web address, because once again, like, the screen reader can just go through and pull out all the hyperlinks. And if every single one of those hyperlinks just says here, no one knows what those are linking to. So you want to link it to, like, the guidance document for this project. And just hyperlink that as like an extra set of information for the screen reader to click on the right link when it's trying to access some outside information. And so, but like this, but again, just to be clear, I'm just using that as an example because there's hyperlinks here. This is the way that the Water Research Foundation wants these to be cited. If there's a hyperlink, you want to spell it out at the end of the reference for that particular reference. But if it was in the body of the text, you want to provide more content. But that is, that's basically it. That's all the information I wanted to share with you guys. I think it should be easy. I mean, I do think it's pretty straightforward, and once you get used to it, it's kind of builds on itself. So it gets easier over time to just use the styles that are native to Word, provide alt text for all of the figures. And it's really important that the original authors provide that alt text, because if someone else is, an editor is trying to create your content for that figure, it makes it a lot more difficult, and your figures might end up with some kind of information that you didn't want to share from that figure. And then, yeah, and then just making sure that all of the headers are correct and providing valuable information for alt text, and making sure that the tables read correctly and the hyperlinks. And those are the major things that will make sure that your document is accessible. And oh yes, so when it's all done, and I think I'm ready, under the review pane, I would click this button that is in Word that says check accessibility, and it tells me that there's no accessibility issues. So that is great, but I'll show you what it looks like when I don't have everything correct. Okay. So now my document's not accessible, and it tells me where the errors are, and then you can just click on that, what it's telling you is not accessible, and it will take you to the location in the document where it's missing some kind of information, and then you can fix it in this drop down by adding a description, and then now it's accessible. So that is it. Does anyone have any questions? Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about the alt text. The first pass that I took going through and trying to provide those, I realized I was basically just rewriting the figure captions. So do you have any recommendations for the level of detail to include, and kind of what additional information to provide beyond just the figure caption to give that benefit?
Yeah. So again, this is something that I think it changes a little bit based on the figure, because you, if you're just like using it as kind of in passing and you don't describe the figure well in the text, then you're probably going to want to add a little bit more description to the figure. A lot of times, and also like, I don't want this to be kind of a ridiculous exercise. If it makes the most sense to just copy the caption into the alt text as a repeat, then that's fine too. Because our captions in scientific technical documents tend to be a little bit more on the descriptive side. So I think that if you're using the figure and the utility of the figure is like well described in the text of the document, then just copying the caption in will be enough.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, and no need to like rewrite it and say it in a different way just to provide alt text.
So I'm sure people have questions. I'm kind of blown away, but I guess some really, stupid questions. Some of these folks have already created, begun drafting and all, not using this template. Mm-hmm. So what do they do in that case? Or what do we do in that case? What do we do?
Yeah, so, okay, if you don't want to use the template and you just want to like move your document into an accessible format, just the Word has native headers. So you can just go in and highlight the text you already have, breaking up your sections, and make those like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Those are already in Word. So just using that styles pane does a lot. And then adding alt text throughout alt text is going to be the number one thing that you'll fail on an accessibility check. So just making sure that every figure has alt text. I'm also available to kind of spot check things if people are having issues or they have certain questions after this training. Then I'm more than happy to answer like targeted questions on that kind of thing of translating it into an accessible format.
Hi, this is Elise. I just wanted to say as well, if you are using the previous template, some of the changes that were made were just the colors, because some of our colors are not enough contrast. Mm-hmm. So that's something that Barb and I can always fix when we're prepping for publication. That change of color is fairly easy for us to make that change. So that's something that you guys don't really need to worry about. We can take care of that piece of it. Okay. If you've already started working in the old template.
Cool.
So
Adam,
I have a question. Okay. Julie kind of just hit the tip of the iceberg. I think I'll dive a little deeper into the iceberg. For example, we published a quality assurance plan, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months ago. We have no intention of going back and doing this to that document. We've just finished our R programming. It's R programming, and you mentioned that at the beginning. That caught my attention on our DPR1 tool. it's done. Yeah, I mean, you just had me, I took a deep breath when I heard you say that. We finished the guidance document. I mean, responding to all comments, it's edited, it's done. And so, you know, Brian and I were just talking about how we get around some of this stuff when we don't have the resources to go back and undo stuff we've already done or redo stuff we've already done. So it kind of took our breath away. And so what we were thinking, for example, on the DPR1 project, and jump in, Brian, if I'm overstepping here, but things that are done, and they become appendices or sections within the final report. But the front end of the report that describes what's there, since it hasn't been written yet, could be put into this format. But the real fundamental nugget, like say the programming done in R, we can't go back and read. I mean,
yeah, I would not. So are you saying that you want to include the R script in the final report?
no, it's a tool. It's
Yeah.
going to be an attachment. Yeah.
I don't think that needs to be.
Good. I'll take that.
Firstly, it's not. I mean, it doesn't seem like a thing that is going to be capable of meeting any kind of accessibility standards.
Well, you mentioned it. That's why I'm bringing it up. We don't want to go back. We have no intention of going back. We don't have the resources to do that. The other thing is in our guidance document, we have all screenshots and, you know, explaining to people how to use the tool.
Okay.
Well.
Yeah, I'm in the guidance document right now. I think. So the screenshots, I mean, we just add alt text and then it becomes accessible. And then, I mean, I think that a lot of it is going to be not that hard to remediate. And I can definitely do a first pass it and then ask you guys any questions that I have. Because the guidance document, I mean, there are a lot of figures in here and a lot of tables. But
What are you looking at? Are you looking at the guidance document?
The old one, yeah.
Yeah. It's full of that, and it would just be a horrendous effort to go back and.
Yeah.
At this time, I mean, 6 months ago, we would have said, or 8 months ago, fine, okay. Maybe the lit review is easy to sort of put it in the format you're looking at, since it's not. We haven't edited or responded to comments yet.
Right.
Things that were like 99% done, it's kind of like daunting to go back and spend hours sorting it out.
Okay. I'll talk to my supervisor about this one. Yeah, because this is really pretty verbose and there's a lot of figures in here.
Yeah, and Tricia, that's made by the research team as well, who is not aware, you know, that they would maybe need to do this down the line. So I don't know how we ask them to do this if they've already budgeted out their project.
Okay.
I guess the same thing sort of. I think Adam's comment's a good one because we do have a bunch of previous deliverables, lit reviews, specifications, you know, a whole bunch of things from DPR 1 and 2. That's clearly going to take a bunch of time. It doesn't seem hard for us to. I'll just finish that sentence. It would take a bunch of time to go back and like re-edit all those things. It doesn't seem hard for us now in October to make our final reports in this template. That seems okay.
Okay.
But I would guess that, like you were saying before, that you had some sort of like minimum criteria, you know, that would help you to kind of put it into this final form. I think a lot of them are already formatted that way. You know, with like headings and subheadings, etc.
Yeah.
So I would guess it wouldn't be that hard to see how we tried to organize it before if you you know, start putting it into this format, those older deliverables.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to my management. I mean, I don't. It is a little bit tricky because it is required for things that are funded, but by the state of California. But I realize the complexity here as we run up against the deadline. So.
Well, it's a resource issue too. I mean, some of it's practical. We can do it, and a lot of it that we've already passed, as you know, both Brian and I said, we've kind of completed stuff, and it's like we don't want to go back and touch it again, because then we got to go hand it to other people to say, do you agree with this if we edit it, when we already got their agreement?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's exactly our problem with like editing these things after the fact, which is why I really encourage you guys to provide alt text for your documents now, because if I go in and provide alt text for all of these figures, then I didn't write this, and I might say something that you didn't intend for me to say, and it makes it really complicated. So this is a unique situation because these do predate a lot of our discussions around this. So I'm going to follow up on it. And
yeah, Trisha, let's just.
So.
Yeah, and I think each of these projects are in a little bit of a different situation, but knowing that, you know, earlier in the summer or May or something, we tried to develop a accessible template, and we provided it to the TWG leads, but it was not, you know, I think we didn't have all the information from you, and then we didn't together edit it. And so it, you know, this is really good timing for grant 2 to get this in the hands of the PIs. But with this, I mean, I think we're going to have to take them on a 1-by-1 situation with the projects and with the specific deliverables of the project, since there's so many. And where we can, you know, Aaron and myself and, you know, our communications group will help where we can. And, you know, we totally understand that the teams are out of budget essentially. And we didn't put this in their agreements. You know, I don't think we didn't flow down this provision, and I don't even know where it is on our agreement. So we didn't flow it down to them. So they didn't build in any sort of budget for this type of work.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, let's just keep in communication, and try to work through this. But I think it is going to be kind of, we'll need to approach it on a case-by-case basis.
I think so too.
I thought also, this is Barbara. I am concerned, and I would think that Elise probably is as well, as, you know, where does the ultimate responsibility for these complying with the accessibility lie? I hear you're saying, you know, Trisha, you know, you don't want to go in and put something into alt text or start manipulating that, because then it's not what was intended, perhaps. And I don't think Elise and I want to get in that position. And Elise and I are only, you know, 2 people. Our resources are, you know, tight too, because we're working on, you know, many other projects besides this. So I think, you know, maybe Julie, you, Elise, you know, Lexi, you know, we kind of need to, when we kind of see this coming in, we need to really regroup within WRF and make sure that we know, and, you know, maybe the level of editing from us is different than what we would normally do. Because I am hesitant about, you know, I go in and do a lot of manipulation typically, you know, to make something fit properly, and I might change line spacing or change leading, but I'm hearing, you know, we can't do any of that. The way the template is the way the template is. But I think internally we need to have a discussion too about, you know, what our resources and what our level of review is on these. Elise, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think we need to touch base internally and figure out how we can best make this happen. You know, what resources we have that we can help out the research teams, and you know, and how far back we go, like Adam was asking, you know, do we go back to existing things, or do we just work moving forward? And I think an internal conversation would be appropriate.
So on a good note, DPR 3, nothing's written, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear what you guys are saying. And I'm going to definitely take that into consideration and think about how we can move forward. But I mean, from here on out, we've had this conversation and I hope everyone feels that they've been brought up to speed. I know we're past time, so I want to respect everyone's time. But so at this point, I would hope that everyone has the tools to make the final reports. But I know what you're saying, like the appendices, they were made in a format that was not accessible. And so I think from like new documents from here, we definitely need to make accessible this like line of remediating things that weren't made accessible in the first place. It's just something I need to follow up on with my supervisors. I mean, yeah, but I do hear what you guys are saying, that it's a really difficult thing to do. And as far as, I mean, I hope that this can be like an internal, a check that we could just like have the thumbs up that the accessibility check reads clean when it goes to Barb and Elise. And then I hope that can be the checkpoint when it's first submitted to you, that you see like, yes, everything is accessible. And if not, at that point, we can turn around and talk to the authors, because that's really the point at which I think would be the best point for us to make that contact. And yeah, that's our checkpoint anyway, is when the original author is done and goes to submit it, then it's checked for accessibility with that Microsoft Word accessibility checker. And if it's not accessible, then we ask the author for information to make it accessible at that point. Certainly not 6 months down the road, which is kind of the situation we're in right now.
Okay, so it sounds like this is the beginning of the conversation, and we'll definitely need to, take a stepwise approach on this and kind of really understand where we are on a project by project basis. But Barb and Elise and Aaron, we can debrief, and then, TWG members, you have the template, do what you can, particularly with new, the looking towards the final report. And then we'll, I think Trisha will also discuss with you kind of if we can meet with Laura and Claire or whoever about kind of what to do with the products that have already been, submitted. And I mean, I think these reports are really unique because while, DPR 3 and DPR 5 are really literature reviews, state of the science reports. And so it's, I mean, those are going to be easier, but the other material with all of the figures and graphs and tool and lab analysis and all that, I mean, it's just not as simple as, getting it in our template. It's just, the number of, it's going to, I think, require a little bit more discussion, but thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Trisha, for putting this together.
Thank you guys for attending.
Yeah, we'll see you in 6 minutes on the other
call.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Happy Friday.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
You
Thanks,
too.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.